She sat alone in that courtroom while they called her a gold digger in front of everyone. They displayed her bank account on the screen. They laughed at her empty gallery. They thought she had nobody. They were catastrophically wrong. The courtroom of the Hargrove County Superior Court is never warm, not in temperature, not in mercy. And on this particular Tuesday morning in November, it is colder than usual. Eleanor Voss-Ashworth sits at the plaintiff's table alone. Not alone as in without her attorney. Lydia Chow sits beside her, papers arranged with surgical precision. But alone in the way that matters in a room like this. Alone in the way that people see. There is no one behind her. The gallery, polished wooden benches stretching back to the heavy oak doors, is filled almost entirely with faces that belong to Damien's world. His business partners, his club friends, his mother, pearls and disdain arranged in equal measure across her chest. 3 rows of people who came to watch Eleanor lose. Damien Voss sits across the room at the defense table, one arm draped casually over the back of his chair, as though he is waiting for a pleasant lunch, not a divorce proceeding that he has made into a systematic dismantling of another human being. He is laughing softly at something his attorney, Richard Vale, has just murmured. His cufflinks catch the light. He does not even glance at Eleanor. He doesn't need to. He knows she is there. He knows she is alone. He has made certain of it. Eleanor does not look at him either. She sits perfectly straight, both hands resting in her lap, her amber eyes fixed on a middle distance that no one else in the room can see. Her breathing is slow, controlled. The way you breathe when the alternative is falling apart in front of everyone who is gathered specifically to watch you fall apart. She has been in this room for 12 minutes. In those 12 minutes, she has heard her name used 4 times, each time as a punchline. She has watched Damien's supporters whisper behind their hands in her direction and smile. She has felt the particular weight of being surrounded by people who have already decided your story. But Eleanor Voss-Ashworth does not shift in her seat, does not reach for her water glass, does not give them the dignity of her discomfort. She sits, she waits. She knows something this room does not. Not yet. Richard Vale rises from his chair with the particular satisfaction of a man who already knows how his story ends. He is polished. He is prepared. And he wastes absolutely no time. Your Honor, he begins, his voice carrying the practiced warmth of expensive education. What we have before this court today is a regrettably common story. A woman of no independent means, no career to speak of, no family resources of her own, who married a man of considerable achievement, spent 7 years enjoying the fruits of his labor, and now that the marriage has reached its natural and legal conclusion, seeks to claim a portion of wealth she had absolutely no hand in building. He pauses. He lets that land. The gallery behind Damien shifts almost imperceptibly, a collective, satisfied exhale. Damien's mother adjusts her pearls. Someone near the back suppresses a smile. Eleanor does not move. Vale continues, and his next word lands like a small, precise blade. Gold digger. He doesn't shout it. He doesn't need to. He says it the way a doctor delivers a diagnosis, matter-of-factly, clinically, as if it is simply an accurate description of observable fact. The term may be inelegant, Your Honor, but it is unfortunately precise. Miss Ashworth, or rather, Mrs. Voss, as she still insists on styling herself, arrived in my client's life with nothing. No inheritance, no trust fund, no family backing of any note. She married into wealth she did not possess, and now she wishes to depart with wealth she did not earn. Lydia Chow is on her feet. Objection, Your Honor. Counsel is editorializing, sustained. Judge Hargrove's voice is even. Mr. Vale, please confine yourself to the relevant legal arguments. Vale inclines his head graciously. But the words are already in the room, already soaking into the walls. He knows how courtrooms work. What the judge strikes from the record often stays in the mind. The morning wears on, and with each passing hour, the performance of Eleanor's isolation becomes more deliberate, more theatrical, more cruel. During a brief recess, Damien's mother crosses the aisle, an extraordinary gesture, uninvited, breathtaking in its audacity, and stops in front of Eleanor's table. She leans down, just slightly, and says in a voice pitched precisely loud enough to carry to the 3 rows of allies she came with, "You really should have found yourself a lawyer with a proper firm behind him, dear. This all might have gone differently." She looks at Lydia Chow with the kind of polite contempt that requires generations of practice. Then she straightens, smooths her jacket, and returns to her seat. Eleanor looks up from her papers. Her amber eyes find Damien's mother's retreating back. She says nothing. Her jaw tightens for exactly 1 second. Then it releases. Lydia Chow reaches under the table and briefly, invisibly, places her hand over Eleanor's wrist. "Hold," she says, barely above a breath. Eleanor nods. Once. Barely. The afternoon session brings fresh humiliation. Vail produces financial records, Eleanor's personal accounts, which are by any visible measure nearly empty. He displays them on the overhead screen with theatrical deliberateness, letting the numbers hang in the air above the courtroom like a verdict rendered before the verdict is rendered. "Your Honor, my client's estranged wife has, at present, a personal net worth of approximately $42,000. She owns no property. She has no investments. She has no family to whom she might turn for support. She is entirely dependent on the outcome of this proceeding for her financial future, which is precisely why she is making claims she has no legal foundation to support." He pauses again. That practiced, devastating pause. "She has no one," he says quietly, "which is why she is asking this court to give her everything." From Damien's side of the gallery, someone actually laughs. It is quickly suppressed. But everyone heard it. Eleanor looks at the numbers projected above the courtroom. Her numbers. Her emptiness, rendered in font size 48 for an audience assembled to witness her humiliation. And she breathes. In. Out. She has $42,000, and she has a secret that has not yet walked through those oak doors. Here is what Richard Vail does not know. Here is what Damien Voss, for all his calculated intelligence, his team of private investigators, his years of systematically dismantling Eleanor's confidence, never fully understood. He knew her name. He never knew her blood. Eleanor Margaret Voss, née Ashworth, was born in the Ashworth Private Clinic in Edinburgh, Scotland, on a Thursday morning in late September, into a family whose name appears on 3 hospital wings, 2 university libraries, a private maritime foundation, and a charitable trust that has quietly shaped policy on 4 continents for 60 years. The Ashworths are not the loudest name in any room. They are the name that the loudest names in the room are trying to impress. Her father, Reginald Ashworth, is the 3rd-generation chairman of Ashworth Capital, a private investment group that manages assets in the range of $11 billion, none of which it advertises, most of which moves quietly through channels that do not appear in newspaper profiles or industry press releases. Reginald does not give interviews. He does not attend galas unless he is the reason the gala exists. He lives between London, Edinburgh, and a coastal estate in the south of France that has been in the family for 112 years. Her grandmother, Margaret Ashworth, built the trust. Personally. In an era when women were not expected to build anything larger than a household. She built it anyway. So why was Eleanor sitting alone in a courtroom in Hargrove County, her bank account displayed like evidence of worthlessness, while Richard Vail called her a gold digger? Because she asked them to stay away. This is the part of the story that requires understanding Eleanor, not the version Damien constructed over 7 years of careful erosion, but the real Eleanor, the woman who had her grandmother's eyes and her father's spine. When Eleanor married Damien Voss, she had made a choice that her family had questioned but respected. She had met a man who made her feel, for the first time, like she was simply a woman being loved, not an Ashworth being courted. She had been proposed to before by men whose eyes, she noticed, wandered to her last name before they wandered to her face. Damien, she believed, was different. He came from comfortable, self-made wealth. He seemed genuinely interested in her. She was wrong. It took 3 years to understand how wrong. Another 4 to survive it gracefully enough to leave with her dignity intact. When she finally filed for divorce and this proceeding began, Eleanor made a decision that was so deeply, characteristically Ashworth that her grandmother had laughed out loud when she heard it. "I want to stand in that room as myself," Eleanor told her father, on the phone from the small rented apartment she now called home. "Not as your daughter, not carrying the family name like a shield. I want whatever I win, if I win anything, to be won on my own terms." There was silence on the line. Then Reginald Ashworth said, in the measured tone he reserved for things that mattered, "Eleanor, you have nothing to prove." "I know," she said. "That's why I want to prove it." He had agreed. He had given Lydia Chow a private briefing, a retainer that bore no relation to the modest figure discussed in the initial consultation, and a single instruction. "When Eleanor is ready, when she says the word, we arrive." They had been ready for 6 weeks, waiting in the wings with the patience of people who have never needed to rush toward anything, because everything has always, eventually, come to them. Margaret Ashworth had called Eleanor the night before the trial. 82 years old, sharp as surgical steel, voice like velvet over granite. "Are you certain you want to do this the hard way first, my darling?" "Yes, Gran." A small, satisfied sound. "Good. The hard way first, and then the right way. I'll be in the car." Eleanor had almost smiled. "You don't have to come, Gran." "Your hip, my hip," said Margaret Ashworth, "has attended more dramatic occasions than this. It will survive one more." So here Eleanor sits, alone by choice, isolated by design, enduring by discipline, not because she has no power, because she is deciding precisely when to use it. Damien Voss has never been more comfortable in his life. It shows in his posture, the easy lean, the unhurried gestures, the way he accepts a coffee cup from his assistant at the courtroom door as though he is receiving a trophy. It shows in the way he smiles at the bailiff, the way he nods at Vale with the private confidence of 2 men who have already decided how this ends. He has the numbers. He has the witnesses. He has 3 character witnesses who will testify that Eleanor contributed nothing to the marriage beyond her presence. He has a forensic accountant who will demonstrate that every asset under dispute was built before Eleanor arrived and expanded through his own work after she did. He has everything. Or so he believes. The morning session proceeds in the expected direction. Vale calls the first character witness, a business partner named Grant, who speaks of Damien with the rehearsed admiration of someone who has been briefed on what to say and compensated for saying it well. "Damien is entirely self-made," Grant says, hands folded, expression earnest. "Everything he has, he built. I never saw any contribution from his wife, financial, professional, or otherwise." Vale nods approvingly. Damien tilts his head with modest acknowledgement. Eleanor writes 2 words on her notepad. Lydia glances at them, does not react, places her pen down. But in the gallery, 1 row back from Eleanor's side, which remains conspicuously, almost entirely empty, there is a woman. She arrived between sessions. She is perhaps 60, dressed simply, wearing glasses. She sat in the 2nd row on Eleanor's side of the gallery without speaking to anyone, without attracting particular attention. Damien's mother noticed her, leaned to whisper to the woman beside her. "Who is that?" A shrug. Staff, perhaps? Some assistant. Damien's mother dismissed her. She should not have dismissed her. The woman in glasses is Catherine Moore, the Ashworth family's senior legal liaison, who has managed the discreet coordination of more legal proceedings than anyone in this courtroom has personally witnessed. She is not here as a participant. She is here as a signal. The clock on the courtroom wall reads 2:17 in the afternoon. Outside, on the broad stone steps of the Hargrove County Superior Court, 3 vehicles have just pulled quietly into the reserved parking bays. Not ostentatiously, not with the fanfare of people who need it, with the quiet certainty of people who reserved those bays 2 days ago. Eleanor's pen moves across her notepad again. She underlines something. Then she looks up, not at the witness, not at Vale, not at Damien. She looks toward the back of the courtroom, at the oak doors, just briefly, just for a moment. Then her eyes return to her notepad, and she almost allows herself the ghost of a smile. Almost. It happens in the final hour of the second afternoon, and it is the cruelest moment of all. Vale calls an unexpected witness, a woman named Sandra, Eleanor's former friend. Someone Eleanor had trusted during the marriage with confidences that were never meant for rooms like this one. Sandra takes the stand in a caramel blazer, her expression arranged into something approximating reluctance, and proceeds to dismantle Eleanor with the particular savagery of someone who has been promised something in exchange. She used to say things, Sandra begins, her voice careful, regretful, about his money, about what she'd be entitled to if things ever fell apart. She had a plan. I always felt that she had a plan. Eleanor does not move. She does not visibly react. But beneath the table, her hand presses flat against her thigh, pressing down, pressing in, and it is the only external evidence that something in her is cracking. Lydia leans close. Do you want to call them? Now? Eleanor's jaw tightens. Her amber eyes fix on Sandra with an expression that is not rage. It is something quieter and more permanent than rage. It is the expression of a woman cataloging every detail of this moment for a reckoning she has not yet announced. Not yet, Eleanor says. Her voice does not shake. Vale's cross-examination concludes. Sandra steps down without meeting Eleanor's eyes. A brief recess is called. And in that recess, 5 minutes, the clerk announces. Eleanor sits alone at her table while the gallery moves and murmurs and Damien crosses the room to speak with Vale in the corridor, and she is left in this enormous room with its vaulted ceiling and its cold light and its overwhelming sense of judgment, and for the first time today, for the first time in this entire proceeding, Eleanor Voss-Ashworth lowers her head. Just for a moment, just long enough to press her fingertips to her forehead and close her eyes and feel the full weight of it, the betrayal, the isolation, the years of erosion, the public theater of her humiliation, the $42,000 on the screen, the word gold digger still vibrating in the air. She feels all of it, all at once. Then she lifts her head. Her amber eyes are bright, not with tears, but with something that has been burning behind them for 2 days, and is now, quietly, irrevocably, refusing to be contained any longer. She reaches into her portfolio. She removes a single card. She places it on the table in front of her, face down. She nods at Lydia. Lydia straightens in her seat. On the other side of those oak doors, 3 vehicles have been parked for 27 minutes. Their passengers have been patient. The patience is ending. Lydia Chow rises to her feet. Your Honor, before we proceed, I have a brief procedural matter. Judge Hargrove studies her over the rim of her glasses. Go ahead, Counselor. The plaintiff has additional parties who wish to formally enter their presence in these proceedings as family members of record and as interested parties with material information relevant to the characterization of my client's financial and personal background. I request their admission to the gallery and ask the court's permission for one of them to briefly address the court before we continue. Silence. Richard Vale is already on his feet. Your Honor, this is highly irregular. It is within the court's discretion, Mr. Vale, Lydia says pleasantly. As you well know, Judge Hargrove holds up one hand, a gesture that requires no volume. I'll hear the parties in question. Bailiff, the doors, please. The bailiff walks to the back of the courtroom. He opens the oak doors. And the world changes. They do not rush in. That is the first thing that strikes everyone who is later asked to describe what happened, the people who will tell this story for years, who will remember exactly where they were sitting, what they were wearing, how the light looked in the instant before everything shifted. They did not rush. They walked in the way that people walk when every room they have ever entered has rearranged itself around them. First comes Catherine Moore, the woman in glasses from the gallery, who moves to stand quietly near the door. She is followed by two men in dark suits who take positions in the back row without speaking, without looking at anyone, their posture communicating clearly that they are not here as observers. Then, Reginald Ashworth steps through the oak doors, 6 feet 3 inches of absolute, unadorned authority. He is not in a hurry. He does not look around the room. He does not acknowledge the gallery, or Vale, or Damien. His hazel eyes find Eleanor immediately, his daughter, sitting alone at a table in the middle of a room, full of people who came to watch her bleed, and for one private second, something moves across Reginald Ashworth's face that has nothing to do with power or strategy. It is a father seeing his daughter hurt. And then it is gone, replaced by the composed, absolute certainty of a man who has decided what happens next. He walks to the plaintiff's gallery. He takes a seat in the front row, directly behind Eleanor. He straightens his cuffs. He is still. But it is what comes next that stops the room entirely. Because behind Reginald Ashworth, moving with the unhurried grace of a woman who has outlasted every room she has ever walked into, comes Margaret Ashworth, 82 years old. Burgundy jacket, white hair swept back, ebony cane. Amber eyes, Eleanor's eyes, 48 years further along the road, taking in the entire courtroom in a single, comprehensive, entirely unimpressed sweep. She walks down the center aisle of the gallery. And the room, this room that has been buzzing with confidence and contempt for 2 days, goes absolutely, profoundly silent. Not because of any announcement. Not because anyone tells them to be quiet. Because Margaret Ashworth's presence commands silence the way weather commands it. The way an eclipse commands it. You do not choose to stop talking. You simply find that you have. She takes her seat beside Reginald, crosses her hands over the head of her cane, and looks forward at Eleanor's back. Eleanor has not turned around. But she knows. She felt the room change the way you feel a pressure shift in the atmosphere. She sits a little straighter, not dramatically, not performatively, just the almost imperceptible lengthening of a spine that has been holding itself under extraordinary weight for 2 days and has just felt the weight acknowledged. Lydia glances back at the Ashworths, turns forward, allows herself one small private breath. Now, look at Damien Voss. Because this is where the story really turns. Damien has been watching the entrance with the polite, slightly irritated expression of a man watching a procedural interruption. He did not recognize the men in dark suits. He noted Reginald's entrance with mild curiosity. Tall man, well-dressed, no obvious identification. But when Margaret Ashworth walked through those doors, when she walked through those doors with that cane and that burgundy jacket and that face that might have been carved from the same stone as Eleanor's, Richard Vale leans over to him and says, very quietly, very quickly, Damien. Do you know who that woman is? Damien looks, squints slightly. Something is pulling at the edges of his recognition, something he cannot quite locate, like a name on the tip of a tongue that belongs to a category of knowledge he never thought he'd need. Should I? He says. Vale's pen has stopped moving. That's Margaret Ashworth, Vale says, and his voice is different now. Stripped of its practiced ease, there is something underneath it that Damien has never heard from his attorney before. Fear. Ashworth, Damien repeats, the word arriving in his mind without immediate meaning, and then meaning, flooding in. Eleanor's last name, he says slowly, her family name. But she said she told me her family was. He stops. His jaw shifts. She said they were modest. She said Ashworth Capital, Vale says, almost below hearing. 11 billion under management. Edinburgh. London. They don't advertise. Damien turns to look at Eleanor. And for the first time in this entire proceeding, Eleanor Voss-Ashworth turns around in her seat. She looks at her grandmother. Margaret's amber eyes, her exact eyes, inherited and irreducible, hold her granddaughter's gaze across the room. And then Margaret Ashworth does something that will be described later as the most quietly devastating thing any witness to this proceeding ever saw. She simply nods. Once. Slowly. With the complete, unshakable weight of a woman who has been waiting for this moment since the day her granddaughter married the wrong man. Who has been patient because her granddaughter asked her to be patient, who has sat in a car outside a courthouse for 27 minutes because her granddaughter needed to try it alone first. I see you. I am here. You were never alone. Eleanor faces forward again. And now, she allows herself the smile she has been holding for 2 days. Quiet. Certain. Dangerous. Reginald Ashworth leans forward in his gallery seat just slightly and speaks in a voice pitched perfectly to carry to the front, not loudly, not aggressively, but with the acoustic confidence of a man who is never required to repeat himself. Mr. Vale. Just his name. A greeting that isn't quite a greeting. Vale turns. Reginald Ashworth holds his gaze for exactly 3 seconds, then looks away, as if the matter is concluded. Vale's color has changed. He is 2 shades paler than he was when he entered this room this morning, and his hands, those practiced, steady courtroom hands, have found each other beneath the table. Judge Hargrove has observed all of this with the unreadable attention of a woman who has spent 30 years watching courtrooms reveal themselves. She leans forward now. Mr. Ashworth, she says, addressing Reginald, I understand you have a statement for the court. Reginald rises. All 6 feet 3 inches of him. He reaches into the breast pocket of his navy jacket and removes a single folded document. Your Honor, he says, his voice carrying the faint music of an Edinburgh education, I am Reginald Ashworth, father of the plaintiff. I have here a statement of my daughter's complete financial background, her inheritance as documented in our family trust, her standing as primary beneficiary of Ashworth Capital's personal estate provisions, and her independent net worth as of last Tuesday's independent assessment, which I am prepared to submit to the court. He unfolds the document. He holds it with one hand. The figure, he says, is considerably more than $42,000. He places the document on the clerk's table, and then he returns to his seat, beside his mother, who has not moved, who has not spoken, who has simply been present in the room like a verdict that has already been written. From across the room, Damien Voss is very still, the way a man is still when the world has just restructured itself around him and he has not yet found a way to move within the new structure. He looks at Eleanor, and Eleanor, finally, fully, completely, looks back at him. Her amber eyes are gold in this light. She looks like what she has always been. She just didn't need him to know it. Richard Vale asks for a recess. He asks with the slightly too casual voice of a man performing composure for an audience that has already seen through the performance. Judge Hargrove grants 15 minutes, and in those 15 minutes, the entire geometry of this proceeding is renegotiated. In the corridor outside, through the heavy doors that do not quite block the voices if you are standing at the right angle, those who remain in the courtroom can hear, though they strain to hear, though they do not mean to listen, the rising urgency of Vale's voice and the flat, diminishing cadences of Damien's responses. The words that carry are the words that always carry in moments like this. "Why didn't you tell me?" And Damien's answer, "I didn't know." Followed by silence, a long, damning silence. Then, veil again, lower now, barely audible. She was always Ashworth. She was always a door. Sharp. Cut off. Damien Voss re-enters the courtroom, and for the first time, for the absolute first time in this entire proceeding, he does not look comfortable. He looks, in fact, like a man who has spent 7 years building a tower on a foundation he never thought to examine, and has arrived to find the foundation is actually a vault, and the vault belongs to someone else. He sits. He does not lean back. He does not rest his arm on the chair. He sits with his elbows on the table and his hands briefly pressed to his face before he remembers where he is, and removes them. He looks at Eleanor. Eleanor is speaking quietly to Lydia. She does not look back. Judge Hargrove returns. The proceedings resume. And now the entire narrative of the day, of the 2 days, begins its reversal. Lydia Chow rises, and the Lydia who rises now is not the carefully restrained attorney who has been quietly absorbing Vale's performance. She is the attorney who has been waiting for this moment, who has been building toward it with the patience of someone who knew exactly when the tide would turn. She requests that the financial documentation submitted by Reginald Ashworth be entered into evidence. It is entered. She requests that the characterization of her client as a woman of no means, no background, and no family support be formally noted as factually incorrect for the record. It is noted. Then she turns to the matter of the assets under dispute, and now, with Eleanor's actual financial background established, the entire framework of Vale's argument collapses. Because Vale built his case on the premise that Eleanor had everything to gain and nothing to offer, that she was a woman reaching above her station. That premise is now, demonstrably, entirely, catastrophically false. Eleanor Voss-Ashworth did not marry Damien for his money. She married him believing in him. Believing, genuinely, that she had found a man who loved her. Not her bloodline, not her inheritance, not the name that was waiting for her in Edinburgh. And the heartbreak of that, the true heartbreak, is not that she was wrong about her own worth. It is that she was wrong about his character. From the front row of the gallery, Damien's mother is no longer adjusting her pearls. She is very still. Her eyes move between her son's hunched shoulders and the straight, quiet dignity of the woman he married, and something moves across her face that might, in a different life, in a different story, have been shame. Damien finally looks across the courtroom at his ex-wife with the eyes of a man trying to recalculate something enormous from scratch. 7 years of assumptions, of treatment, of contempt, and finding that the calculation returns a different answer every time he runs it. And Eleanor looks back at him, not with triumph, not with cruelty, not with the vindictive satisfaction of someone who has waited for this, but with the exhausted, final, relieving clarity of a woman who needed the world to see what he had tried to make invisible. She was never nothing. She was never powerless. She was never alone. He just never bothered to find out. The settlement was reached in 48 hours. Not the settlement Damien had planned, not the carefully engineered outcome that Richard Vale had spent 6 months constructing. The settlement that becomes available when the other party's attorney realizes that the cost of continuing is significantly higher than the cost of concluding. Eleanor received a fair portion of the marital assets. Not everything she was owed, but everything the law could give her, argued at full strength and accepted by a man who no longer had the architectural confidence to fight. But that is not the part of the story that stays with you. The part that stays is this. 3 weeks after the proceedings conclude, on a Saturday afternoon in November, Eleanor Voss-Ashworth sits in the library of her grandmother's Edinburgh estate with a cup of tea and her grandmother across from her. And Margaret Ashworth asks, "Are you all right, my darling?" Truly. And Eleanor considers the question with the full seriousness it deserves. "I think," she says slowly, "that I needed to know I could stand there, in that room, by myself." and not fall. Margaret nods, her amber eyes quiet. And, could you? Eleanor looks at her tea. I was falling. Inside. She looks up. But then you walked through those doors. That, says Margaret Ashworth, is what family is for. Not to fight your battles. To remind you of what you are, so that you can fight them yourself. This is the lesson that this story carries in its bones. Never mistake someone's chosen stillness for powerlessness. Never mistake their silence for having nothing to say. Never mistake their isolation for having no one. Some people walk into rooms without their armor because they are deciding whether the room deserves to see it. And some people stand alone in courtrooms not because they have been abandoned, but because they are waiting to reveal what they already know. That they were never, not for a single moment, actually alone. Damien Voss learned this the hard way. The way that cannot be unlearned. The way that will quietly rearrange every assumption he makes about every person he underestimates for the rest of his life. That is not punishment. That is simply education. Delivered by karma with the precision and quiet satisfaction it has always reserved for its finest work. Before you go, I have 3 questions for you. Question 1. When Eleanor's grandmother walked through those doors, what was the exact moment that broke you open? Was it the nod, the silence, or the amber eyes? Tell me in the comments. Question 2. If you had been in Damien's position in that moment, watching that door open, what is the one thought you believe would have gone through your mind first? Question 3. Have you ever been underestimated in a room, made to feel small, unseen, disposable, only for the truth of who you are to eventually, powerfully, make itself known? This community needs to hear your story. If this story moved something in you, share it. Save it. Come back to it on the days when someone has made you feel like Eleanor in that courtroom. Because every woman who has been called powerless while carrying something extraordinary inside her deserves to hear this. Your family may be blood. Your family may be chosen. Your family may be the version of yourself you haven't introduced to the room yet. But you are never, never without your people. Subscribe to Karma's Heiress. Because the reckoning always arrives, and it always walks through the door exactly when it is needed most. She didn't need saving. She needed witnessing. Her family gave her both,